Sticky buns. That's what we're making today. It's your regular cinnamon bun, baked over a bed of caramel sauce and nuts. And once it's done baking, you turn it upside down so all the goodness stays on top. And this right here is the ultimate version of it. So let's not waste any time and get right to it and see what we need. For the dough, we'll need some white flour, milk, yeast, salt, sugar, and some soft butter. Then for the filling, we'll need butter, sugar, and cinnamon. For the caramel, we'll need more sugar, butter, some salt, honey, or you can use maple syrup and some double cream. And we'll need some nuts. I'm using walnuts and pecans. Or you could use any nuts you like really. Now on to the equipment. You'll need a nice deep baking dish, some non-stick paper, a bowl, scales, a dough scraper, a temperature probe, a spatula for spreading the filling, a pot for the sauce, and a rolling pin. So let's start with the filling and the sauce. The filling's pretty easy. Combine the sugar and the cinnamon, give it a quick mix, and then add the butter. And then keep mixing until you have a nice spreadable paste. I'm using light brown sugar for this, but you could use any sugar you like. You can use white sugar, soft brown sugar. I just used this because that's what I had at home. So with that all mixed up, leave it on the side for later. And we can get on with the caramel sauce. In a small pan, combine the sugar, salt, double cream, honey, and the butter. All the elements in this recipe are super easy, so this sauce will take no more than 5 minutes to make. And if you don't want to make sticky buns, well, pour this on your ice cream. You could use it for many applications. But regardless of what you use it for, give it a quick mix and let's bring it over to the stove. You want to cook it on medium heat. And keep stirring it occasionally. I wouldn't suggest leaving the stove as you're doing this. You want to stir it once in a while to prevent it from sticking to the bottom of the pan. And once it comes up to a boil, you want to boil it for 1 minute. If it's bubbling too ferociously, turn the heat down a bit. As soon as it's ready, pour it in your baking dish. You can find the measurements for the tray I'm using down in the recipe. If you don't have a small tray like this, then simply double the recipe and make it on a big tray. Now sprinkle the nuts evenly all over the sauce. I've seen recipes where the nuts go in first and the sauce goes on top, but I think that doing it this way makes it more even. One thing you can do is grab the tray and tap it against the table. Now leave this to cool down, we can get on with making our dough. I'm using cold milk because when kneading dough by hand it's going to warm up. You should always use cooler liquid when making dough by hand, because if the dough is too cool after mixing, you can simply knead it for longer to bring the temperature up. But if it's too warm, there's not much you can do. So in my large bowl, I combine the milk, yeast, salt and the sugar. Now give it a good mix to dissolve any large salt and sugar crystals and hydrate the yeast. Now add the butter and continue with the flour. And that's the last ingredient for the dough. Now you can grab the scraper and mix this together until there's no more dry flour left. And if the scraper's not doing the job, continue on by hand. And once everything's mixed well, pop your dough out on the table and we can start kneading it. This dough is not sticky at all. It's very easy to knead, very easy to handle. So I'm using my regular kneading method here. What I like to do is press down and forwards with the heel of my right hand. Then using the fingers of my left hand, I fold the piece of dough under the heel of my right hand. Then turn the dough and repeat. And once you've done this a few times, the motion will become fluent. It'll be like second nature to you. Knead this for around 6 minutes. And once your dough is nice and smooth, roll it into a bowl. Now we can pop it in a bowl and take its temperature. Around 26 degrees Celsius is just about right for this. If your dough or your kitchen is cooler, it may take longer to ferment. If it's warmer, then it will ferment more rapidly. I fermented this for around 2.5 hours, and as you can see it has doubled in volume since we began. And straight after the bulk proof, we can do the final shaping. Get your rolling pin ready with a bit of flour, take your dough out of the bowl and give it a good dusting of flour. Before I start rolling the dough, I always like to press it out by hand, just to get it into a general shape. This should prevent it from getting distorted by the rolling pin. Press it into a rectangle and try and give it some corners as well. Now we can continue on with the rolling pin. Don't worry about measuring sizes too much, just roll it into a massive rectangle. The most important part is to get it nice and even. And take your time, don't rush this. And once you rolled it out nice and big, just finish it off by hand. Try and make it as straight and square as possible. And this is just about right. Now we can start dabbing on the filling. And yes, dab it on there, don't start spreading it right away. This will guarantee that you have an even coverage all over the dough. And just as with rolling, take time and care to spread the filling on. There's no rush. The sugar that I used was quite grainy, so it wasn't easy to spread on. So I did it gradually, by holding the spatula nice and straight. Make sure to leave the top edge uncovered, we'll use this to seal the dough up. And before we start rolling, straighten everything out for one last time. Now brush the edge with a bit of water, and we can start rolling this up. And I'll say it again, do it gradually and slowly, there's no rush. Start off little by little, and as you roll it forwards, pull it towards yourself to build some tension. And once you get comfortable, you can start rolling it quicker, always pull it back. When you get to a point when the ends start poking out, you can either stretch the dough out in front, or you can push the ends in. As you can see, I did a bit of both. Regardless of what you do, try and roll it nice and straight. And when you get to the end, seal the dough up. Simply pull the loose end over the roll and press it in, and the water should make it stick. But to really make sure that it stays put, you can pinch the seam together. And if you ever made cinnamon buns before, this process will be very familiar to you. Now we can cut this up, but before we do that, we'll remove the ends, because they're mostly empty dough. Now you can go the extra mile now and brush the loaf with butter. This will ensure that the buns are really easy to tear off of each other once they're baked. And I sometimes do that, but I kept it simple this time. But regardless of what you do, once you've cut the ends off, we need to divide this into 12 equal pieces. Use a serrated knife and cut it with a sawing motion. Don't press the knife down, go back and forth. You don't want to squish your buns, so simply divide the dough into 4 and then divide each quarter into 3. Now bring the tray over with the sauce and the nuts. When you go to lay the buns down, I would suggest starting with the larger ones and placing them around the edge, and then finishing with the smaller ones. There will always be larger and smaller buns. The large ones will always be at the middle of the roll, the smaller ones will be at the ends. Try and space them out nice and evenly. Like I realized at this point I could move them around a little bit to fill the tray a bit better. So if you need to do that, then do it and correct them. That'll make the end result look better. Lastly, once you arrange your buns in the right position, press them in with the palms of your hands. This will not only help them fuse with the sauce and the nuts, will also make them all the same height. But be gentle and push with the flat part of your finger or your palms. Don't use your fingertips. And so that's it, they're ready for the final proof. Now cover them up and leave them for around 2 hours, and they really need to puff up before baking. And during the final hour of fermentation, preheat your oven 160 degrees Celsius with the fan on. And if your buns are taking longer and your kitchen is cold, leave them for longer. Same goes the other way around. Bake the buns when the buns are ready, not when the time is up. Right, this is a little last moment decision here. I'm going to brush the buns with milk. This is not mandatory, but I thought if they're going to be in the oven for quite some time, they need a bit of moistening. And they will take a while to bake, around 35 to 40 minutes. And if your buns are getting too dark, cover them with some tin foil towards the end of the bake. But once they're beautifully puffed up and golden brown all over, they're ready. Now I know it's tempting, but we must let these cool down for at least 30 minutes before we touch them. So go and watch some of my other videos while you're waiting. Right, to invert the buns, simply get something that'll fit the tray. I've got this slate, which is the perfect size for this. Now you don't want to hesitate at this point, you want to turn it over in one swoop. Pick it up, hold it from the top and the bottom, and simply turn it around. Now say a little prayer to the bread gods, tap it a couple times for good luck, and remove the tin. But of course it came out perfectly, because we were smart enough to use parchment paper, right? Now peel it off and enjoy your buns. Trust me, this is the sauciest, stickiest, nuttiest bun ever. Look at that layer, it's like ½ an inch thick. And it's not one of those buns where you remove the tin and all the sauce comes out on your table. This is the real deal. But what do you think of these buns? Is it something that would tempt you? Let me know down in comments. And if you have any questions or suggestions, also let me know. And if you love bread and baking, subscribe to the channel. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.